Welcome to the 45th episode of the Rhetorical Sake Recipe for PTSD. Mental Health Awareness Month may be ending, but the struggle is not over for folks like me. On this episode, I'm going to go through some traumatic experiences and how I've worked through it and how I haven't worked through it. Ultimately, this episode is just a bunch of storytelling and me relating on the grounds of my chronic PTSD, general anxiety disorder. I'm not ashamed, I'm not a victim, I am a survivor, and I'm here to tell my story. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to Earth.
Growing up, my mother moved her and I to Atlanta, Georgia. And as a single parent to a young, light-skinned, green-eyed, black child, she provided for me as best that she could. I had a lot of toys and, my bicycles and tricycles and a big wheel. And we weren't well off. She worked in department stores and really worked hard to give me a solid foundation. And it taught me a lot of independence. Breakfast was never like eggs and bacon unless it was the weekend. And to this day, I love my mother's scrambled eggs, how she makes those. Oftentimes I was late to school, waking up, would dress myself in my school uniform, and it'd be like a Pop-Tart for breakfast, and eat that in the car. Cinnamon, brown sugar flavor was my favorite. I enjoyed strawberry too. And listening to the radio on the way to school from outside of the city to the high class part of town where my private school was. It was right around the corner from the governor's mansion. And I knew if I was late for school, like really late, if this show on KISS 104 came on called It's Your World, and the theme song was like, "It's your world, hey, don't you know you can change it?" And it was like this soap opera. Sometimes it made me super uncomfortable because they would have like on-air sex scenes or something. But as entertaining as it was also a cue that, I was late again. And that was pretty common. And I started at that school when I was like 3 years old. And I remember going to birthday parties and seeing my classmates' houses and how big they were, how many stories they had, all these crevices and rooms. And we'd be out in the yard jumping on the bounce house and having cake and ice cream, and if I needed to use the restroom, I would get a glimpse into how that classmate of mine, most of the time white, was living. And I wanted that. I wanted the big house, new or old, with all the crevices and stairs and doors, and just, you could smell the life that ran through it. I was in a neighborhood that we lived in that was predominantly two-story townhomes, I guess condominiums. And it was low income, predominantly black, and 2 doors down from me was another neighborhood boy, the single mom, and he was about my age. And we both had big wheels. And so we would race. It was very common for us to challenge each other, as kids do. And we had like this racetrack in our minds of the sidewalk that ran in front of our houses, down the side of the next row of townhouses that was perpendicular There was a little grassy area in between those. The sidewalk went through. And then the sidewalk ran along the back fences of those houses. And so to the left are the backyards with these tall fences, and to the right is a wooded area, just woods going downhill. And then you come out the other side and you make a lap on the sidewalk in front of those houses and then back up our sidewalk, and that was the track. Well, we took off and he was in the lead because we both couldn't take the corners at the same time. And I round the corner behind the houses, perpendicular to ours, out of sight, plain sight of the street, behind these houses. And as I'm riding, I feel myself stop. And I feel myself, with my big wheel, lifting off the ground. And I can't remember feeling someone's hands on me. I can't remember what they looked like. I just remember I kept pedaling and didn't know what else to do. I wasn't extremely panicked, but I knew something was wrong. Something was happening. And what I saw down the street, down the sidewalk at the end, was the other neighbor, looking back at me in complete horror and shock. And just the look on his face as I slowly got set back down. And I was like Fred Flintstone, pedaling in one place until I just took off to catch up with him. It wasn't until about a month ago I asked my mother about that experience because I wanted to know if it really happened. Because like I said, I don't remember seeing a person. I don't remember feeling human hands pick me up. Part of me thought that I imagined it. And I felt bad because in my memory, after that, I take off and I jump off my big wheel in front of my house, and then next thing I know, I'm talking to a female police officer. And when I asked my mother about that incident, she told me that the neighbor had run in our house and just told her that they got him. They got Eric. And she asked him, well, who got Eric? And he said, the man. The man came out from his house and grabbed Eric. And she said by the time that she was coming out of the door, I was running up to her. And so that verified to me that it happened. That someone in this city that had been grief-stricken from what is known as the Atlanta Monster, who kidnapped and raped and murdered poor black children throughout the 80s, this same city, someone had attempted to abduct me. And this only recently kind of landed on me. I've had other family members somewhat say, oh, that time you were approached. And I've had to maintain that it wasn't just an approach. I was grabbed. I was picked up in the hopes that I would drop my big wheel, that no one would see. And I realize now that had it not been for that neighbor looking back to see where I was, whoever it was that tried to take me may have done so. Now, how that person didn't get apprehended or caught, given the small vicinity of houses, I don't know. What I do know is that we later moved, and after speaking with my grandmother, I learned that my mother had become increasingly paranoid about the windows of that townhouse, that condominium that we lived in. She didn't feel secure. And we didn't move too far, but we moved to a nicer apartment complex just across the freeway. as a kid, being so young, I don't think I really focused on that incident too much. Like, I knew that it happened, but I don't have any memories of me thinking I was living in fear that someone would come and take me. I just kind of blocked it out and moved on. It was never really addressed or spoken about too much or dissected, because ultimately, I was okay, as far as we knew. Now, at 6 years old, 1996, still in Atlanta, summer of the Olympics in Atlanta. Since my mom was a single parent and we had family, I had 2 great aunts and a second cousin, maybe third cousin at that point, one of my great aunt's son, living in Atlanta. And so often hang out with them, especially on the weekends when my mom was working, and be babysat. And that was just family. That was normal. I didn't have siblings. Dad wasn't around, but I had family. And they told me that we were going to a birthday party. And they said the kid's name, and I was like, I don't know who that is. I was kind of a smartass as a kid. Like, if you asked me something a little out there, I'd be like, are you out of your mind? But they were like, you'll find out when we get there. You know who we're talking about. Well, we never got there. We were on Interstate 75, had to be going south. And I'm in the back seat on the passenger side. And it was the 90s. And my cousin had laced his shoes in a certain way where you couldn't see where they were tied. Like the bow was behind the mouth or the lip of the sneaker. And I really wanted him to tie my shoes like that, of course. You have like an older brother, older cousin, like you want to be cool. And so he was like, all right, like unbuckle your seatbelt and scoot over so I can tie your shoe like that. So I do that. He starts lacing my shoe up, and we are in the fast lane, and a hatchback Honda, so 2 doors, hatchback. It's a small car. It's like a tin can. It's like a tuna can on wheels. And it's so odd because I remember these moments leading up to when panic starts to set in. And we're in the fast lane. So to the left is the shoulder, and then the median divider between the northbound traffic and us. But this semi-truck is swerving in and out of the fast lane, the lane that we're in. And my aunt that's driving can't speed up fast enough, because the driver is swerving unpredictably, and she can't slow down for some reason. So I would later learn in physics this is called drift. An object is moving at such a force, a rate, it can cause other objects that are in its wake to get caught in its drift. You see this, a lot of times in water with the ripple effect. In air, it's kind of, but you feel it when trucks or cars are passing and you're trying to make a turn and your car sways. Well, that was happening at about 70, 75 miles per hour. So we're realizing that this truck is pulling over, not slowing down, but he's pulling into our lane. And my older cousin starts screaming and yelling, cursing his name. He's like, you MF for this, you MF for that, like, stop it, all this stuff. And my great aunt driving, reprimands him, like, don't talk like that, watch your mouth. And for the first time, I saw how people act when faced with imminent death, with fear. This truck starts to squeeze us against the median, still not slowing down, and sparks fly on the left side of the car as we scrape the median. And the reflectors that run along the side panel of tractor trailers, semi trucks, are inches away from my face, and the roof, the axle, the car just starts folding, and I remember glass just exploding, my window exploding. Um, yeah, things seemed to slow down, but this also wasn't like a quick hit. Like we were running parallel and being crushed slowly. I did not have my seatbelt on. It came to light later that the wheels of the truck were very close. Since the axle had popped, it popped upwards. It split in half, so I got wedged um, closest to the truck, and I heard my aunt scream to my cousin to grab me, and he grabbed me and covered me and took me in, and everything goes black. I come to, and these like college students, I hear voices, are like standing behind the car, and they're like, "Oh my God, like there's a kid in here." And so they lift me up and they help us get out of this crunched car that's like the size of it was already a small car, but now it's only as wide. I've seen, Ottomans love seats wider than this thing. And there's glass, a shrapnel piercing out of one of my aunt's legs, and I'm covered in glass and this dust, and we're just sitting down on the asphalt. The traffic has come to a standstill, and the truck driver gets in the only ambulance there. He gets carted in the ambulance, and a police officer offers to drive us to the hospital. That truck driver, when we were in the hospital, I later found out, was very concerned with how we were doing. He had suffered a massive heart attack, and he lost the ability to control the rig that he was driving. And we were caught in between him pulling over into that shoulder lane. And, life went on after that. Once again, as a kid, I've never lived life before, so there was no really unpacking or talking about it. And I've discussed in previous episodes a mother's prayer, hearing my mother cry and thank the Lord that I was miraculously spared. And even though physically I was spared, a part of me is still there. A little bit of me, something I still haven't gotten back, died that day. Trauma is a very general term for a lot of unexpected, painful events. And moving on from the car accident, with the childhood obesity and then being very effeminate, I actually when we went back to the junkyard to get our belongings out of that car, and we saw it, weeks later after the accident. And it was all of us that were in it. It wasn't my mom. It was my two aunts and my cousin. It was something that we went through. We went to that car, and I had an umbrella, and that umbrella was made by Disney, and it had Snow White on it, and around the umbrella, the 7 dwarves are like walking behind her. Like, I loved all the princesses, and I'm grateful my upbringing allowed me to express myself. I wasn't reprimanded too much for being effeminate. And it's funny today, I think that helps me now, because I'm not looking, even though whatever my lifestyle or sexuality is, I really appreciate my masculinity. So I believe in allowing a child to be who they are. And now I've come to believe in past lives, and the fact that I knew I was going to work in Hollywood when I was 3 years old, and I would jump on the couch screaming it. I don't count that as happenstance. So there is something to restricting and tearing someone down when they're so young, because no, we don't know who we are, but we know who we are, if that makes any sense. In any case, the man that did raise me, who was a father to me, his best friend was my little league baseball coach. And he was violently murdered at his house while his sons were home. And his sons were my age, and I often was at that house playing video games with them. And two men, he answered the door, assaulted him, beat him up with baseball bats. Brutal, brutal, to the point where his brains are falling out of his head. And even though the boys were hiding in the bathroom, these assailants made them come out of there and look at their father, torn apart. And because these attackers were never found, our life was uprooted, and we had moved into a single family home in the suburbs, and my mother had gotten a job with a law firm as a paralegal, and it was like right when things were getting good. I was on my way to middle school. I was in 5th grade, and then I'm being told that I had to move away on my own, move to live in Virginia with my aunt and her family, her growing family. And that was abrupt, and a part of trauma or things that are traumatic are often losing people that we are close to very suddenly and unexpectedly. So to have to move away from not only the place I know, but the people I had known since I was 3 years old. I mean, I got potty trained with these people at the same school year after year. I had to say goodbye, and I didn't realize how these abrupt changes and events affected me until now. I'm 31 years old. So it's 6th grade. I'm in a private school, and I'm living this life where I am sitting around a dining room table with my mother's sisters, and an uncle and my little cousins and my grandmother, and we're having breakfast and dinner at the table. Like, this was this like commercial nuclear family life that I had so wanted. And I had started at a new private school, and we're sitting there, and slowly, one by one, we start getting called out of class. And I get called out of class, and my aunt is there to pick me up, and she says terrorists just crashed planes into the World Trade Centers. Now, I'm in 6th grade, so that was a pretty heavy sentence to hear. I really didn't know what it meant, but we were hearing on the radio, and everything was at a standstill. Cell phones weren't working. Everyone was helping each other, though. Everyone was extremely nice, like in the neighborhood. Nobody really knew what to do. But it wasn't this chaos, but there was this somber layer, thick fear, because we couldn't reach our people. My mother at that point had made it to Virginia, and she was down the street from the Pentagon on the freeway. The man that would become my stepfather was on the George Washington Bridge. All of that got shut down, standstill. And so I remember before I left class, my classmates were sobbing, crying, because their parents worked in the Pentagon, and news had gotten to them that a plane had crashed into where supposedly their parents worked, in the Pentagon, and that later ended up being true because they took us to the Pentagon on a field trip, and we saw the area where their offices used to be and how it was under construction from the attacks. Once again, there really was no decompressing. There was no dissecting on what happened, what happens after this, how do we move on. As we all know, what happened publicly, a war started. And so it's November, and actually that weekend, Gene Brown, my father from Georgia, was up in Virginia, doing some some handiwork for my aunt. And I went with my uncle and my little cousin. We went to the barber shop because that's what men do on the weekends, especially in black families. There's multiple guys, like you all go to the barber shop together. And so went and got a haircut. And then I met up with my mother at the shopping mall, who's like my little, and she's with my younger cousin, who's like my little sister. And congrats to her. She just got her master's degree. I'm very proud of her. I'm a little jealous because now she has a degree that's higher ranked than my bachelor's. All right, I see you. No, I'm happy for her. Our family is aspiring and blossoming despite all this stuff. I had this nickname. They called me Old Navy Boy because once I left out of private school, on the weekends and moving to Virginia on my own as an only child, money was my love language. So I would spend money on clothes, and Old Navy was affordable and stylish to me. I dressed like a dad even when I was a kid, and I still dress like a dad. Um, so I'm not that cool. I'm really not. My mom took me to Old Navy and we got a winter coat and some other clothes, and she and my younger cousin stood in line at Auntie Anne's Pretzels while I went and took the bags to the car. And it was chilly. It was November, and I put on the coat, nice puffy winter coat, and I start making my way back to the mall. And I'm about to cross the street right in front of it. I look left, no cars coming. I look right, coast is clear. And as I step out, I start jogging because it starts to rain, and it's already cold, so it's like freezing rain. I blink, and as I'm blinking, I can see this bright light coming towards my peripheral left side. And I feel myself flying, like getting thrown, tumbling over the hood of a car. My head smashes into the windshield, and I like swivel on it and spin. And I land like cross-legged Indian style, no shoes on. Like if you saw this on Reddit, like no shoes. Like I got knocked out, but I was conscious and in shock. And I see this big navigator coming towards me, and I just decide to get out the way. I didn't know what else to do, so I try to get up, but I end up walking like moogly, like my legs are straight, but my hands are on the ground, and my butt is like in the air. And I get to the sidewalk, and it feels like this lightning bolt just strikes me in my back, and I just collapse. And all these people start crowding around, and I'm having this moment where I can't really move. Like it hurts too much to move. I don't really understand what just happened. I'm hearing people say he just got hit by a car. People are asking my name, if I'm there with anyone, if anyone knows me. And so I tell them that my mom is in line at Auntie Anne's, my name. And I realized I'd been hit by a car. And I'm looking up to see my mother and my cousin, who are both in shock. They didn't see what happened, but they see the chaos, the crowd gathering. And I go to the ER, and my father, Eugene Brown, meets us there. And I can't even get off the bed, the gurney, to pee, to move. I was in so much pain. They wanted to take x-rays and I absolutely loathed it. Like, I did not want to have to move. Um, but slowly and surely I did, and that steel table, it seemed unbearable to sit there still for the x-rays to be taken. And they had given me Motrin, and I hadn't eaten all day, so the emergency room doctor diagnosed me with a sprained back. That's it. He's got a sprained back, no internal bleeding. He's fine. And upon leaving the emergency room, I'm transitioning from the wheelchair to the car, and I just start spinning. Like, everything starts spinning, and I've never felt more nauseous. And I felt like I lost all motor function. Like, my world was just totally in chaos, and they literally had to like pull me into the car because I couldn't do it, because I had no grip on what reality was. Whether that was from the Motrin or a concussion, mild traumatic brain injury, I don't know. What I do know is the somber mood when I found my family, in the family room downstairs, my aunts, everyone sitting on the couch, and just, it was real. Like, okay, like, we almost lost Eric today. And after that, I was out of school for about a week, and my grandmother would force me to move in the morning, to stretch, to rotate my arms, to do everything that absolutely hurt. And during that time, normally I would sleep on like this fold out cot, because sometimes there was like 12 of us living in that house. I was deep and I loved it. I did not love it when I started going through puberty, though. I needed some privacy. Um, my my mother's youngest sister, she had the bedroom downstairs. She actually gave me her bed that week so I could sleep comfortably. And I got back to school, and I remember a friend of mine telling me, explaining to me how they told everyone I had been hit by a car. And it was like September 11th, and that happened, and we all just kept going. Like, we just kept moving on. And I went on to high school, and it was in high school that I would get these blinding headaches, like blinding, like I could not see, just terrible, sharp, like a ice pick was stabbing me in my head, and also excruciating back pain. So with my stepfather, a new stepdad, he sent me to his chiropractor, and the chiropractor by my junior year showed me an x-ray of my spine. Well, first he showed me, he was like, this is a normal spine. This is your spine. And he was like, you can see like where the car hit you. Like, it looks like the front bumper. So some scoliosis, but also not a candidate for surgery. Just chronic pain. And so over the years, it came to light after that accident. My aunt, who had a townhouse, the economy, I don't know if it started booming after September 11th, and then there was the crash in 2008. But they had moved into a nice single-family home in the suburbs, and my grandmother had this whole apartment to herself in the basement. And I would sleep on the couch down there when I would visit, and she would tell me, you were running around screaming last night in your sleep, sleepwalking, but running, screaming, thinking that a car was going to hit me, thinking that I could not get out of the way of a vehicle. And I had no recollection of these dreams at the time. And my aunts would tell her, like, don't tell him that, like, you're going to scare him. And it did scare me. It scared me to hear that I was doing something in my sleep that I had no idea I was doing. It would be one thing if I was just talking or yelling, but to be running around in a panic back and forth, like doing things that were so visceral, in a state where I wasn't woke, it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. Eventually, I did have the dreams that were memorable, and there were dreams of me crossing a street and a car is coming and I can't move. It's like my feet are stuck or I'm running in one place and I get hit by the car. And um, I did not know that these dreams were signs of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I would go to like summer camps, not summer camps, but conferences, leadership stuff throughout high school. And it was a lot of times it would come to light when I was at a place I was not familiar with, or in a hotel room, or some like college campus like dorm that had been turned into, housing for our conference. My roommates or whoever was staying in the same room would tell me, like, you were screaming in your sleep. Screaming. Like, you sat straight up and were yelling. Like, and eventually I just laughed at it because I didn't know what else to do with that. Like, I can't really control it. I'm not consciously deciding to do that, but it's not a good way to make friends. It actually is very off-putting to a lot of people. Just a heads up. So, some of you have read my books or you know a little bit more about my journey. But, while I was in rehab, I was on my way to a doctor's appointment. They were driving me, and the driver doesn't brake and just runs into the back of the van in front of us on the 405. And I wasn't in immediate pain. A lot of times you're not in immediate pain after a car accident, and what I've learned is that even in that instance, ambulance should have been, because I still have chronic neck pain from that accident. Maybe, and so moving on. This is the thing. All this stuff is so compounded, and that's why this is a recipe for PTSD. I've never been to war, never served in a military branch. I haven't witnessed bombs going off. But in a way, in my own life, I have. And when the car was exploding from being crushed, when my family was screaming, seeing them react as if we were about to die, and that those primal reactions, they stay with me. They haunt me. And this stuff was not unpacked because maybe it's being black, maybe it's being lower class, middle class, not being able to really afford any more treatment. But, I just moved on. I just kept living, so I thought, and thinking, time would heal all wounds, but I never saw them as damage or wounds to my mental state until recently. So I leave an AA meeting in 2018, May 3rd, in Newport Beach. It was like 7:05 I left. I'm sitting at a stoplight. I was actually on my way to meet with a potential sponsor. It's like business venture I was doing to promote my book and get sponsorship for a book signing event. I was on my way to drop off that letter and meet with the manager of the business when all of a sudden my whole body is flying towards the roof of my car. My head is pressed up against the roof of this 97 Ford Explorer. I really didn't know what was happening until I was on the other side of this intersection, and I can't move my neck. I can't turn my neck. It's just too stiff, too painful. But I move my eyes and I'm able to reach for my phone, and I see this car has rear-ended me, and this man gets out of this Jaguar, and he doesn't come up to me. He doesn't know who's in my car, if it's just me, who I was. He looks at his car, and I start dialing 911, and next thing I know, I look in my side view mirror and that car is gone. He left. So I let 911 know I've just been hit. I don't really know what's going on, but I can't move too well. Police, ambulance show up, and they extract me from the totaled car. And that's when I hear that this driver that hit me was drunk. His car broke down up the street. And so there are these incidences where everything was just fine. And it's like, you get up, you get dressed, you do what you gotta do, assuming, trusting, hoping that everything's gonna be alright. That's what we're supposed to tell ourselves, right? And the fact of the matter is, the harsh reality for me is that maybe everything's not going to go as planned. And yeah, that's pretty normal, especially when you put a bunch of human Homo sapiens behind the wheel of these vehicles with rubber wheels made out of steel, with airbags, and tell them we'll be okay. Things are going to happen. For me, it's just like a lot has happened to me. And a lot of it, I thought that I was okay until the last 3 or 4 years, when the words trauma, traumatic event, PTSD started to come out of my mouth. And this got broken down for me in rehab, in therapy, and looking at why I coped with alcohol so much. Because after getting hit by the drunk driver in 2018, it came to light how damaged my spine is, and the chronic pain that I would be in. And so I transitioned to Palm Springs because the Coachella Valley has a lot of older retired people, and thus good health care. And pain management was the main goal, was to get pain management. And the support I have found in the community of people with chronic pain is something that is priceless, and I'm grateful for it. I think now I'm going to start delving more into the community of PTSD. And it hurt, working in Palm Desert. I had a hiring manager. I'm very casual with like my trauma. Like, I think I'm too casual. Like, you see it like kind of come out of characters on TV, like in these moments, and I'm just like, oh yeah, like I have PTSD. And I have to be careful about that, because I think it minimizes, it belittles how heavy that statement is. And the hiring manager told me, oh, well, my husband has real PTSD. He served, he served overseas. He's got real PTSD. And that irritates me. I still resent that statement to this day. And I identify with people that suffer from this mental health issue that doesn't come solely from being a veteran of war. It comes from traumatic events, and it's part of the human condition. More recently, working in therapy, it is chronic, my condition, and so I have to be mindful of that. And here we are in the evening on the last day of May, Mental Health Awareness. And I'm not ashamed that, because this is the thing, like, yeah, it's cool to put out stuff at the beginning of May or throughout the month. And maybe I could tell myself, oh, I slacked off, I should have done this sooner to coincide with the awareness month. But I'm glad I'm doing it now, because this does not fade for me. Just because the month of May ends, it does not mean that mental health issues just go away for the rest of the year until next year. June is coming with all the pride parades and all this rainbow and happiness celebration and debauchery. And I still feel the pain in my neck and in my lower back. I still hear the crunching metal, the glass shattering. I still dream and get frozen and paralysis in my dreams. I'm still coping with, just now, starting to cope with all of these events that have transpired. And as some of you know, losing a, one of my best friends that I've had in the last 10 years abruptly, that's traumatic. That is traumatic. And as a society, we have witnessed trauma for the last 15 months over and over. It has been a traumatic 2 years. For me, maybe a year and a half or year for most, but the recipe for PTSD does not require military service. If you are like unaware of what PTSD is, it has like these symptoms of reliving aspects of what happened. So like vivid flashbacks. So just a few days ago, a semi truck swerved into my lane, and now I'm working on incorporating skills I'm getting through therapy, as far as like thought stopping, noticing my automatic reactions with the heart racing, sweating, racing thoughts, reliving the trauma that happened to me at 6 years old by just driving down the street and having an indecisive truck driver jump in and out of my lane. It took me back. And I've had moments where friends were like laughing at me because I would have full-on panic attacks or just shut down when we're merging into traffic and I'm not driving. That is a surf. When I'm driving, I feel way more in control. But when I'm in the back seat or in a passenger van, how I was when we rear-ended someone on the 405 while I was in rehab, it messes with a trust factor that I'm safe, that I'm okay. So I have to work on trusting that even if things aren't okay, I can survive. There's symptoms of PTSD that have to do with alertness and feeling on edge. So panicking when reminded of the trauma, being easily upset or angry. So lately, like, I have been upset for the past few days because of what triggered days before. Extreme alertness, also called hypervigilance, irritability or aggressive behavior, finding it hard to concentrate. So where I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, I would just get spanked if I didn't complete my work in school. But I do now understand that maybe my inability to concentrate was due to some mild traumatic brain injury, as well as some post-traumatic stress, from having to move abruptly to being smashed by a semi truck to almost being picked up by a stranger and trying to be taken, kidnapped. Being jumpy or easily startled is a symptom, and I live in an urban environment where there are a lot of loud noises and they do trigger me. Avoiding feeling or memories, so feeling like I have to keep busy, avoiding anything that reminds me of trauma. So sometimes just not going anywhere, not getting on the freeway, feeling emotionally numb or cut off from your feelings. And that is what I have been feeling. I wanted to do this podcast 3 days ago, but I could not understand why I was feeling so detached, why I was feeling numb. And the fact is that these feelings are going to come and go. And now I'm not consuming alcohol to dilute them, to escape them. And a symptom of PTSD is using alcohol or drugs to avoid memories, difficult beliefs or feelings, feeling like you can't trust anyone, feeling like nowhere is safe, feeling like nobody understands blaming myself for what happened, um, overwhelming feelings of anger, sadness, guilt, or shame. So ultimately, as you all know, I've suffered two cardiac events, heart attacks, myocardial infarctions from stress, from trauma, from not being able to trust this life that I'm going to be safe. And it is challenging. I know that I don't want to die, especially not by means of a heart attack at this young age. And so I don't let myself go there, especially not on a consistent basis. Um, the body releases cortisol and adrenaline when we feel emotionally stressed. And when you meet me, if you've ever met me since I've been 13, I have been graying, and I'm just now learning about how cortisol and stress and oxidation affects the human body. I had often wondered, why did I grow gray so early? Why is this happening to me? No one else in my family is like this. But if you look at the track record of what I've gone through and how it was internalized and not worked out, then it makes sense. And then coping with alcohol and smoking cigarettes or whatever that ages you. And to live in fight, flight, or freeze, it's like a non-stop, ongoing battle to just breathe. Sometimes just reminding myself to breathe. But I will say this. This recipe for PTSD can be countered. For me, I counter it with exercise, with running. Is something I wasn't able to do much as an overweight kid, as well as meditation and sharing with others that can relate. And whether that means sharing with people in AA or with other people that have PTSD or who have survived what I have survived, ultimately owning up to the fact that I'm not a victim, but I'm definitely a survivor. And there are lingering effects to pain and trauma that are ongoing if not addressed. And I'm addressing them. And ultimately, what I want to share is that if you are struggling with PTSD, it's okay. If you're struggling with general anxiety disorder, and you experience some of these symptoms, or you are living day to day constantly in fight, flight, or freeze mode, if you're having terrifying nightmares where you're reliving a trauma, or you're startled easily, or you don't understand why you feel emotionally detached, it's okay to start addressing the why and getting down to the causes and conditions of our situation. Because just because this stuff happened to us doesn't make us any less valuable than anyone else. We have a place in this life. We're here for a reason. We survived. We survived. And our story is worth being told. And sometimes that storytelling is the antidote. And it's not just one time for me. It's over and over. I've shared some of this before on the show. And it clearly wasn't enough. But this is me addressing and getting a cathartic relief and not letting that situation have power, but me taking precedence over it. Ultimately, for me, I don't just want to talk about it. I want to be about it. I want to be about the survival aspect and just offer my digital hand to anyone that wants to relate, or you're struggling. I'm going to post some resources in the show notes on who you can talk to, where you can go, who you can call. This show isn't sponsored by BetterHelp or anything like that, because I can't afford that right now. So, but if you can, we are worth the help, despite what, this is a disease. It's unfortunately a disease that is contracted through events, through experience. And that is a very, very complicated and tricky diagnosis. Thankfully, it's been identified, and the solution, the vaccine, the antidote is right here. And sharing and talking to others and not living in fear or this belief that it doesn't matter and I'll just be okay, because I thought I was just okay. And drinking till I black out and not stopping drinking the day after, that's not okay. Now I'm able to live a life that has tools, that has practices, that has resources, that I didn't know were there before. So the feelings of abandonment, loss, distress, they are minimized, and I'm able to identify them when they crop up. In any case, I want to thank each and every one of you all for listening. That was my recipe for PTSD and where I'm coming from, a little bit more about me. And I just hope, someone can relate. I like listening to podcasts with people that struggle with the same stuff I struggle with, and this is me presenting my struggle to you. Yeah, thank you so much.